Take a look at this fight. We have a rigger with a heavy laser and a mini beam, and it also has a combat drone. I'll start by showing you how the fight normally goes, like this. This is roughly what's going to happen most of the time. Okay, we're fine. Now, a couple of things to note here. One is that this should be pretty obvious, but I will state it anyway. Don't use your anti-bio beam when you're in danger, right? This is something you save for when you have control of the fight. So we're using the breach bomb with dual lasers. Also, if you were to take damage in the weapons, 2 damage in the weapons from the heavy laser, say, then you want to keep the breach bomb online in preference to the dual lasers because it's faster. It only requires 1 evasion check to do damage, and it also causes a breach. So this is just better if you have to pick one. And finally, we send all of our shots into weapons. The reason for that is mainly that the drone control could have a buffer. So doing a point of damage to the drone system might not take this offline. If it does have a buffer, then it would also mean they had a system repair drone. But the point being, we want to focus our damage on stuff that actually slows down their offense, rather than a system that might not affect their offense at all. Anyway, at this point the fight is under control, and we can do stuff like move our crew into shields to counter the drone more effectively. And we can start trying to take down other systems. And we see in this case it didn't have a buffer. That's going to start pulling their crew, so this one is going to come over here soon when the breach is repaired. About now, yeah. So I might just wait for them to repair that. And then do this. And at this point we can probably try switching to the biobeam. Might even want to speed things up. Okay, so that's how it normally goes. Normally everything is fine. This exact fight happened to one of the absolute best players in the world, and the enemy straight up murdered him. He went from 27 hull to 0, even though he'd already bought the shields buffer. So we're going to take that example and say, with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything you could do? First, you need to make a threat assessment. Now, the whole fight is bad, but what is the biggest threat? It's the heavy laser. This thing can take down your shields with 1 shot, even with the buffer. And that is what happened in the game. The combat drone fired first, then heavy laser into shields with a breach, then the mini beam swiped through shields as well, so his shields were completely destroyed. The enemy also dodged his first volley, and the next heavy laser went into weapons. He tried to repair shields, but they hit him in shields again, and in weapons again, and then all his hull was gone. Now that is a worst case scenario in terms of enemy targeting. It's very unlucky. However, it's also a realistic possibility. And in this video, I want to share a tactic that I think improves your chances of survival quite significantly. So the first thing you might think about is, how do I reduce the chance of them targeting shields? And you might say, I'm going to vent like this, maybe, and turn off oxygen. Or alternatively, you could decide to vent through shields and then not have to vent through medbay. But on the whole, I don't think I like having shields vented. So maybe you do something like this, right? And this is specifically for hard difficulty. I forgot that airlock. So now we are below 50% O2, and we didn't even need to fully vent medbay here. And what that means is oxygen is now on the smart targeting list, so there are 3 systems that are priority targets, oxygen, weapons and shields, whereas before there were only 2 systems, which are weapons and shields. So you could run like this. And you see, FTL is kind of proving my point. So that heavy laser went into oxygen instead of shields, and that is a much, much better outcome than going into shields. Okay. However, I feel this sort of stuff is actually kind of a trap for advanced players who have this knowledge. When I initially started testing this fight, I was doing this as well. I was thinking, yeah, I guess I should drop the oxygen, right? Are you sure? The thing about this is that yes, it does reduce the chance of your shields being hit. If we're talking about shields specifically, and that's really what we're most concerned about, then the chance of that heavy laser targeting shields is dropped from about, what, 19.4% to 15.2%. And you have to ask yourself, is this worth it? Because yeah, in this case we're okay, kind of, because we can just repair oxygen. But you have to think, what if it hit me in the shields anyway, right? You haven't reduced the chance of it going into shields by that much, and now you're in a situation where your oxygen is low. So instead of repairing oxygen, we'd be like repairing shields, and then they also could hit us in oxygen. And then they can hit us in shields again, and so on. So what can happen if you do this is that you might have been able to keep up with the repairs in shields and even weapons. You might have been able to stabilize the fight if you only had to worry about this system. Or maybe you only had to worry about these 2 systems. But now you have to worry about these 3 systems. And so oxygen kind of puts a timer on how long you can be using your crew optimally, or even just properly, for repairs, right? And being able to repair shields is really, really important. You might need to do it multiple times in this fight if things go badly. So on the whole, I actually don't recommend this tactic for this ship, at least not in this specific situation, right? Quite often, some of these targeting priority tactics can be overdone. Alright, let's look at how I would play the fight now, with the benefit of having thought about this and toyed around with it for a while. First thing, which is relatively basic, is you should be starting your crew and weapons, not engines. You can always move them to engines, but there are situations where having the weapons manning bonus right from the start can mean the difference between, for example, were you able to fire your weapons or not? Or were you able to fire your weapons fast enough to take down an enemy weapon before it actually could fire? And then, as we just saw, I'm not going to be venting the ship. I'm going to leave it on 100% O2 so that I have a lot more time before I have to worry about oxygen problems. And now we get to the interesting part. You see, the combat drone's firing time is effectively random, because it depends on what path it takes, depends on what angle it chooses each time it fires. And that means we don't know whether the drone is going to break a shield and let the heavy laser in, or the other way round. Now we'd like it to be the heavy laser that hits first and then lets the drone in, but we just don't know. Something we do know is that the timing on this weapon is exactly the same as the timing on this weapon, because they're both 9 seconds and both of us are manning our weapons. And that means we can use this charge bar to give us a better feeling of when this weapon is going to fire. And here's what I'm going to do. Actually, this times out quite well. I think this one is going to be alright. Could maybe have moved to engines already. I don't think I mess with this one. You see? So this is the situation we want. The heavy laser hits first. Here's another one. We really don't know what the time is going to be, so we just have to observe it. This one is actually pretty good. I think I leave that. Yeah. Okay, it didn't time out. You can see though, it would be pretty hard for me to manipulate that. Like that heavy laser could easily have come in here. So you can't always do this sort of stuff perfectly. Now there is a bit more than just feeling and guesswork to this. You need to know the numbers, or maybe it just helps to know the numbers. A shield will take 2 seconds to recharge. The heavy laser travel time is what? Minimum is 1.1 seconds. Okay? So we need to drop the shield, or have the shield dropped for us by the combat drone, about 0.9 seconds before the heavy laser fires, which also means about 0.9 seconds before the breach bomb is ready. So those are the kind of numbers that you're playing with. And very roughly... what about this one? Oh, this is close. It's going over here. Very roughly, you're looking at trying to drop your shields a second before this fires. So that's going to fire in about a second. Like 2 seconds. I think we leave this one. Yeah. Boy, that was close. So some of this is going to be hard. It's not always going to work out that nicely. And again, we stay manning weapons, both for the benefit to the weapons manning, also to have a better judgment of when this is going to fire. This I need to drop. And you know, it would be nice to get into engines in time for the combat drone shot, but I think it's more important to have a good judgment about the timing of this and when you're going to drop your shield. And again, if you're really going to optimize this, then you know, you can try to get the timing down very tight. I would say the most important thing is not to wait too late and then disable your shield, because in that case you'd be letting both the shots in, right? This one, I think this is actually just gonna, the shield is gonna pop up and then this will fire. But I think it's actually a bit too late. Yeah. This one I think I can optimize a little bit. Like, probably it works out, but... oh man, of course the drone moves there. Okay. That was a perfect example of why you might want to try to optimize the timing, right? Because we let the shot in. And it was really close. Now you might be thinking, what if I don't have a convenient 9-second weapon to time against? Isn't this getting even more difficult? It's like, yeah, most ships in the game don't have a weapon with that charge time, but also it's not the only way that you could time things. And in fact, I was just thinking about this and I figured, well, why don't I time it against O2? If anything, that's probably going to be easier and more reliable. And this might be another reason that you maybe don't want to drop O2 below 50%. Because we're going to start from 100%. and that will make it very easy to time. Now, what I think happens with the O2 number here is that it will drop down as soon as it gets to the 0.5% level. So it will show 99% as soon as it's down to just below 99.5. The range would be 98.5 to 99.5. I think that's how it does the rounding. And oxygen drops at 1.2% per second, same rate that it refills at. And if you calculate all this stuff out, remember this is firing 8.1 seconds. We want to start raising our shield 1.1 seconds before then. Then you want to start raising your shield at 7.2 seconds, which translates to oxygen dropping down to 91.36%, which is really close to 91.5. So we could just let this drop to 91%. Also remember that the minimum travel time of 1.1 seconds for this heavy laser to our shield, that is for any player ship at all, including the crystal ships and say the Federation ships, which are bigger than most ships, right? So it's going to take slightly longer, even in the minimum case, to reach the Kestrel here. For a comparison, an NG ship, instead of having a minimum travel time here of 1.1, it would be 1.29 seconds. Anyway, we're going to let it drop to 91%. .92, 91, toggle the shield, and you'll see this is just perfect, right? There you go. Easy as that. Another way that you could do it would be with crew movement. Unlike on the Slug A, we have 3 crew, so we do kind of have spare crew in engines. And we want to time 7.2 seconds. Crew move at about 2.2 tiles per second, so 7.2 times 2.2 is just under 16 tiles. So I'm going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want to go there, I think. Let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then back. And we could even just start it a fraction earlier. Maybe here. There you go, same thing. One more example of how you can time this stuff. We could use the teleporter cooldown. We're going to board immediately. And each of these ion clocks is 5 seconds. So again, 7.2 seconds, that's 5 seconds plus 2.2. And then the remaining 2.2 seconds, we want to divide into these 12 pieces, little segments. So each one is about 0.417 seconds. And if you calculate it out, you say, well, after it hits 3, I want to count another 5 and a bit segments, right? So there's 3. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're not quite going to go halfway. Also, we should be doing the micro at the same time, right? Something like this. One more tactic you could consider in this fight is that you might want to start manning your shields just before the heavy laser hits. So now we're looking at layering tactics on top of each other. So what I'm going to do here is drop the shield, and about the time I drop the shield, I'm going to start moving into shields from weapons. Of course, this would depend on how far away your shields room is. And the reason for this is that I've already got most of my weapons charge, and these weapons, If the heavy laser does hit me in the weapons, I'm not going to be able to fire my burst laser 2 anyway. If the mini beam hits me in weapons, I can swap. So you see, I'm manning shields for when the heavy laser hits. It's very, very unlikely that will block the mini beam completely, but the shield manning has a pretty good chance of stopping it from dragging into a second room. So we fire the Artemis and then we can swap. Mini beam now can't take the burst laser 2 down. And you see, we took 1 damage, but then the shield popped up and cut off the mini beam. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how this tactic can be useful in defending against a combat drone and a heavy laser. But there are still 2 questions I've avoided answering so far in the video, because it gets a bit tricky now. One of them is, what about when you don't have the shields buffer? Should we still use this tactic? And the answer is, honestly, I don't know for sure. The worst case scenario would be something like, well, the drone shoots you in the shields, and then the heavy laser shoots you in the weapons. And that's really bad. On the other hand, the drone is quite a bit less likely to shoot you in the shields than the heavy laser is. We're talking about, what, on this ship, without lowering O2, 6.7% versus 19.4%. So the odds are quite heavily in your favour. Honestly, I don't know. Like, also think about this. If the drone shoots you in the shields and then opens you up to the heavy laser that shoots you in the weapons, that's really, really bad. That's worst case. But it's still only a 10% fire chance in the shields, and you only have 1 bar to repair instead of 2. Of course, the heavy laser could also shoot in the shields, but then if it was going to do that anyway, so what? Right? You lost all your shields. So on balance, I would favour still using this tactic even if I don't have a shields buffer. You might sometimes be able to look at what the drone is doing, right? Usually you can't tell, but sometimes it will be moving and rotating in such a way that you can be really confident it's not going to shoot shields, or maybe it looks like it will, you know. So you might just possibly be able to use the information about what this drone appears to be doing to help make a decision. But otherwise, I would lean towards using the tactic even if you don't have a shields buffer. Again, I'm not sure. And finally, if the fight goes really badly, you might actually need to use this tactic multiple times, because maybe the heavy laser does not go down. It does get more and more difficult to keep track of time as the fight progresses, and you know, all sorts of things start to happen on your ship, whatever it might be. So you just have to do your best. Just imagine that our weapons miss. Okay, didn't work that time. Trying to do it by feel here, which also means I'm being more cautious, right? So if you lose, I could have been using the oxygen method, but if you lose track of the timing, and especially on the 2nd or 3rd volley or whatever, if you're trying to do this, then I think if you've lost track of the things that allow you to measure it precisely, then you have to be a little bit more cautious and leave a bit more room rather than trying to be really precise. Otherwise you let them both in. But anyway, hopefully this tactic might be useful sometime you find yourself in this sort of horrible fight and you want to prevent the worst RNG in the world from ending your run.